Yeah, so what's your name?
I'm Brad.
I'm Noah Giles.
Sydney Thane.
My name's Colin.
My name is Julia Jensen.
Michaela Reeder.
My name is Malone.
Alexa.
Alright, yeah, my name's Isaac. So what we're doing is we're interviewing people, getting their opinions about like ADHD. In your words, what would you say is ADHD, or what do you know about it?
Like,
No, I'm actually not too familiar with this, so could you explain it a bit?
So recently there's been a rising debate as to whether ADHD should or shouldn't be considered a mental disorder. And in this video, I'd like to investigate that. To begin, I was curious about what the average person knew about ADHD, so I interviewed some college students to get their opinion on the issue. Yeah, so what's your name?
I'm Brad.
I'm Noah Giles.
Sydney Thane.
my name's Colin.
My name is Julia Jensen.
Michaela Reeder.
My name is Malone.
Alexa.
In your words, what would you say is ADHD, or what do you know about it?
No, I'm actually not too familiar with this, so could you explain it?
Is it attention deficit hyperactive disorder? Is that what it is?
Do you know what ADHD is?
It's attention deficit hyperactive disorder, right?
Basically, it's just a type of neurotypical disability. Makes it harder for people to focus.
I know it's kind of like a cognitive, or I guess the ability to like concentrate cognitively and kind of concentrate.
What would you say is like the stigma around people with ADHD?
They're kind of crazy, distracted.
Like all over the place.
Yeah.
You know people that have ADHD?
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you know? Like without them telling you?
They cray for real.
My younger brother was diagnosed with ADHD. I was diagnosed with ADD.
And do you know anybody that has ADHD?
No.
Oh, I have a bunch of friends that have ADHD. Like one of my roommates has ADHD. It's pretty funny sometimes.
So it's funny because I have a friend that has ADHD. I believe I might have ADHD. All of my friends are like, you should probably go in. Like, you should probably have ADHD.
Yeah.
So there's one opinion that I've seen as I've been doing my research, and it's that ADHD is not necessarily a disorder, but it's more neurodivergence. You know, people think differently. Do you think that could be the case, that ADHD people, they just, they're better with, hands-on things, or just like they're not meant to sit in a classroom?
For sure. I think musicians and drummers and things are always tapping and doing things. And so you see that. And I think people with ADHD are kind of the same way, as far as like they're better at other things than us and their brains work a little differently.
Some people might, I don't know if you can term them as being detrimental. I guess everyone's different. But like for me, I didn't really see it that way. I saw it as like an opportunity to kind of prove myself and to show myself in other ways.
Like exactly said before, it's the person before the disability. Not the disability does not define the person. Like the person is before the disability.
Like you're not autistic, you have autism, right?
I have autism, like you are autistic. No, I'm a person that has autism because that does not define me.
Cool. Last question is, so it seemed that people knew a bit more about ADHD than I once thought. But what surprised me was that so many people with whom I talked didn't have ADHD or didn't know anybody that had ADHD. For some reason, I always thought that having ADHD was so common. For sake of transparency, it might be worthwhile to explain why I'm so interested in ADHD. My name is Isaac Hale. I'm 21 years old. I'm from Linden, Utah. I love the outdoors, sports, music, and hanging out with friends. But my whole life, I've felt just a little bit different. I have ADHD. But what really is ADHD? And what is it like to live with it? ADHD is the most studied mental disorder to date.
So it is a neurodevelopmental disability that impacts people primarily in terms of impulsivity, hyperactivity, and inattention.
It used to be ADD, attention deficit disorder, and I think attention or ADHD with specifiers. So now they've collapsed all of those into one diagnosis called attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD, and then they give you specific specifiers.
Before I started pursuing this project, or even before I received my formal diagnosis, I almost viewed my ADHD as a superpower. giving me gifts and tendencies that help me have a richer life. And that's definitely the narrative that social media will tell you.
Brain blizzard?
It's like the brainstorming that normal people do, except way better. My brain is literally constantly brainstorming 24/7, so when I get to use it for something useful, amazing.
I feel like we most often talk about the disadvantages of ADHD. However, there are a lot of superpowers that come along with the ADHD neurotype.
Hey, have you started doing that big project you have for class yet? Not quite. What's that you're drawing there? Oh, it's just this like little drawing I'm doing. It doesn't matter. Well, it can't be nothing. You've been a couch potato all day working on it. Let me see. Holy sh**. When did you learn how to draw like that? I don't know, it was at some point this weekend. It's Tuesday. Yeah, no, I knew that.
If we look at ADHD in particular, one of the strengths of it is the ability for people to hyper-focus. So people with ADHD can become really immersed within a task and enter more of like a flow state and be able to kind of like have superhuman abilities almost.
I even thought that ADHD could give me some sort of comparative advantage. But is that really the case?
I've noticed from my own experience several benefits of ADHD. For one, brainstorming. Sure, my mind is rarely quiet, but I'm comfortable in that.
My version of ADHD is something like an intense game of whack-a-mole that goes inside my head constantly from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I fall asleep at night. Thoughts, images, questions, memories, ideas all pop into my head seemingly out of nowhere. And each one holds the promise of something so amazing that I just have to follow up on it right then and there.
One distraction can lead to an unending train of thought, fueled by intrigue for each next thing. It's like popping popcorn. One kernel goes, and then they all take off. I'm also good at navigating outside my comfort zone. If something's intriguing, I can't not pursue it. So my interest often trumps any anxiety from exploring something foreign. I have to know what's over there. That culture, that school of thought, that hobby or lifestyle, or literally beyond the next mountain.
So interesting. It does seem like having some ADHD-like symptoms can help in some ways. So is it really a disorder? Well, there's a catch.
One other thing to recognize too is just when you're thinking about disability broadly is that it is a socially and contextually bound concept. Something that can be considered disabling in one context isn't disabling in another.
A few years ago, scientists discovered that men of a certain nomadic group in Kenya who had a genetic variant that's implicated in the restlessness and shifting curiosity of ADHD were better nourished than their counterparts without the variant. But in a group of those same people who split off to live sedentary lives, the men with the variant were undernourished compared to their counterparts. Interesting. This information has kindled discussion as to whether ADHD should even be pathologized. I mean, if it was adaptive for survival, then it's supposed to be here. And whether you know it or not, humankind, you're grateful for us.
So context matters. Sure, we can hyper-focus on something and work on it for hours on end without getting tired. But at what cost?
So for instance, like, my cousin has ADHD too, so he has autism and ADHD, and one of the things that I've noticed with him is he gets hyper-focused on something with school, and then he misses the 10 other assignments. And in missing that, it causes him a lot of anxiety and guilt, stress, all those types of things. So then we have a spillover, so where then it compounds his attention issues. And then another one is that because ADHD kind of shifts your attention, and people do tend to get, I think, hurt in interpersonal relationships because ADHD has some unique characteristics to it in interpersonal relationships. That one that comes up is like abandonment sensitivity. They'll feel like they're rejected often because of maybe their inability to pay attention where they want it to in a relationship, which then can make a pattern of like your partner's talking to you and you're not paying attention because you're really focused on something else, and then your partner's feeling unheard, and so then you get rejected but you didn't even know it.
I actually wouldn't say that there are benefits of ADHD. I think there is a tendency for people who have ADHD to be hyper-focused on certain things. They can't focus on what's important, but they can be hyper-focused on other things. For example, some of the nephews I've talked about, they have ADHD, which I knew that something was up with them, you could kind of tell, but I would have never in a million years, even someone who has ADHD. I have ADHD, and I know I do, and I've known for over a decade. But when I heard that they had ADHD and that they were taking Adderall, that shocked me, because these kids have read more books. They're like 13 or 14 right now. They've read more books in the last 2 years than I've read in my entire lifetime.
In college students, I think what's really hard about college is, like, if you think of the context, most kids are moving, they're 18, haven't been alone before, move into a university, and they're having to learn how not only to do school, but manage life. And then we're like, well, I can't pay attention in class. Well, excuse my language, but no shit, because you're worried about how do you pay for food, how do you pay for your rent, how do you manage relationships. Oh, I discovered drinking, even though I'm not supposed to be drinking below 21. Oh, now my friends are in all these, dilemmas with social relationships. It's just a really chaotic event, I think, for a lot of kiddos. And if you have any underlying ADHD or any other underlying mental health concern, it just compounds it.
I like the idea of reading. When I go to Costco and there's those, you know that aisle, everyone knows that aisle with all those books. Look at all these awesome books. However, every time I've read a book in my life, I sit down and I can read 3 or 4 pages and then my brain just like stops. I have to read really slowly and reread stuff. And I'm not even talking about school stuff. I'm just talking about reading just for fun. My ability to concentrate on it, if I try really hard, I can, but it'll only last for 15, 20 minutes, 30 max.
Yeah,
and
I can that.
Yeah, and it's just, then you add to that, let's say it's a textbook, so we're going back to school, and I'm not interested in reading it, and it's not that exciting. Well, forget about it. My brain, I'll see some word, which makes me think of something that happened yesterday, which makes me think of another thing, and my eyes have gone all the way down the page, but my mind has gone off into nowhere land, and it's just like, what just happened? And I think that happens to everyone, but for me specifically, and those who I've talked to that suffer from ADHD, it's not like something where it's like, oh well, just focus a little bit harder, or just try to focus. People will say stuff like that. Well, just don't let your mind wander. Don't, just try harder to focus. And it's like, I would if I could.
Superpowers or not, many of the symptoms that people with ADHD experience can be debilitating, especially when one doesn't know how to manage them.
Despite my superpowers, a month and a half ago, I was up late standing in my kitchen while my family slept and was in a bad way. I could see my traits affecting my partner, my son. I was not making progress on work, long overdue. Trying medication, overdoing it on self-care, taking time to recharge, but still unable to focus. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm supposed to give a TEDx talk in 6 weeks about why I'm glad I have ADHD. But I'm not.
When I was listening to Salif, it made my heart ache because I knew all too well what he was going through. Even as I was researching those TED Talks, it was 2 a.m. in the morning and I could not make myself go to bed because I was hyper-focused. So how can people with ADHD lead successful lives if they have this disorder? I've wrestled with this question for a long time because it's what I try to do every single day of my life. And it's a relevant question because considering it a disorder opens doors to those who are trying to receive help. So if you can kind of group in a way people that have similar symptoms and it's causing them harm or grief in their day-to-day life, if we treat it as, a disorder, we have that classification, then these people that are having struggles are able to get the resources and tools that are going to help them to lead with.
I will caveat what you just explained as very much how I think about the world. To me, I view diagnostics as very much a tool to qualify people for services. So if you think, how does someone get a service? Usually it's insurance, right? And to get an insurance to cover a service, what do you have to have? A diagnostic code. An ICD-10 code is what they're called. And to have that, you have to go through a diagnostic procedure. So that's how you qualify for even just getting the supports you need to, be able to live and participate in community if you have any type of varying issue.
Those resources can include things like expensive stimulant medications such as Adderall or Ritalin, but also mindfulness interventions and clinical therapy. But there is one more issue worth mentioning. But there's an effect called Pygmalion.
I've never heard of it.
But basically the idea is that if you become what you believe you are.
Oh, yeah.
So like if you think that
Creates a role in the mind,
right,
then the mind
and I've
goes
experienced
into
this with my ADHD is if I focus on it too much, or if I think, oh, I'm like there's something inherently wrong with me, or different or not typical about me, then I almost use it as an excuse, and I get down and I'm not able to function as well as if I just shut it out of my mind and if I just went on with my life. But I learned to work with the barriers, the obstacles that I have with helping me focus and help me to be productive, and I'm able to do well. But if I focus on it too much, then it becomes harder.
So for instance, I've gone through lots of treatment before, and to have treatment covered, I had to have a diagnosis. Did I go through any full screening diagnostic procedures? I don't remember as a kid. So did the therapist likely just throw some type of diagnostic label on that and didn't tell me about it and just kept supporting me? Yeah. And then he was treating something but didn't tell me about it, because actually what we know about a lot of what we're seeing with diagnostic labels is when we actually tell someone they have something, the stress increases.
It just gets one thinking. Is ADHD inherently dysfunctional, or is it more of a fish out of water condition? Imagine traits that were once potent fuel for the fire of nomadic success are now remnants, glowing embers waiting to be stoked, nurtured back to life. What if the stigma of ADHD and its exclusion from mainstream ideas of functionality is a prohibitive drizzle, suppressing those embers, though unable to extinguish them? The stress of not being able to function in an environment for which you're not adapted, while expected to, is heavy.
So other than the central difficulties of ADHD, having all of society tell you that there's something wrong with you, that you're broken, is hard.
I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is like, what is your actual target of treatment, or what's your goal? Is it trying to get rid of having that issue? I don't think you can, because it's part of the normal human lived experience. These are just differences in people's human experience, and we're trying to help them learn skills to live well with their experience. Whereas the medical model, which says, let me give you medication, this will then treat it and stop that from occurring so you have better options.
So is ADHD really a disorder? If that means that it's a real way of being that has a real effect on people, then yes. But to use it as a term to describe someone as broken or dysfunctional, I think is counterproductive. I think we should remind ourselves that everyone's brain is different, or by the same logic, broken. So I agree with what Brad said at the very beginning.
There are ways to help them and provide for them, and not necessarily mean that they are suffering for a sense, but also just kind of help them understand themselves. Everyone's different, and you got to find your strengths and weaknesses and work towards your strengths.
So if during any part of this video you've thought to yourself you might have ADHD and you're a little worried, don't. Many people with ADHD have led wonderful lives and have accomplished wonderful things. People like Albert Einstein, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison, and many more. We all have strengths and weaknesses. We just need to learn how to work with both.